tonight. I love this quote by Frederick Douglass: once we learn how to read, we will be forever free. And that's really centering our work tonight. But as parents, this is perhaps what you may feel like when taking kids to school.
Bit of a shaky start to the school year.
Well, I don't think anybody expected us to dominate day one, but getting a call from the school, a bit unexpected.
First day picture, was it taken?
Technically, yes, but we're gonna run it again this weekend and hopefully forget it was a reenactment.
Can you comment on the holding call at the chart?
Yeah, the goodbye hug lingered, which set us back emotionally.
Light up high tops certainly drew some attention.
I guess. Would have been nice to know about finger painting on day one.
Have you figured out how to log into the school website?
No idea.
So that's just to acknowledge the very hard work that we do every single day. Was everybody able to see that video? And you're able to see my screen? Yes. Okay.
The only thing we're seeing right now, Stacy, is alphabet. There's not
you're kidding.
there's not the video. I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm so glad that you said that, because the video was so funny and I was sitting here just enjoying it all by myself. But let's go ahead. Can you see it now? Okay, fantastic. Okay, best friends, it's worth us doing that video again. So thanks so much. 30 seconds of your time.
Bit of a shaky start to the school year.
Well, I don't think anybody expected us to dominate day one, but getting a call from the school, a bit unexpected.
First day picture, was it taken?
Technically, yes, but we're gonna run it again this weekend and hopefully forget it was a reenactment.
Can you comment on the holding call at the chart?
Yeah, the goodbye hug lingered, which set us back emotionally.
Light up high tops certainly drew some attention.
I guess. Would have been nice to know about finger painting on day one.
Have you figured out how to log into the school website?
No idea.
All right, fantastic. You're able to see it this time, right, besties? All right. So the reason why we are starting with that video is because we parents put our hearts and our souls into our little scholars. I do not know of a greater commitment of time, of energy, of love, of psychic energy. So I just want to acknowledge that this topic tonight most likely is both heart-wrenching for some individuals, exciting, exhilarating, just a whole mix of emotions. Because who are we talking about? We're talking about our own child, our own children. And the gravity of that goes beyond without saying. So here's just a little language model for us in terms of acknowledging again what parents do every single day. And I think that you're really going to most likely appreciate this and the work that you do at home to support your scholar.
What you want?
I want a cheeseburger
Cheeseburger?
with Swiss cheese.
Swiss cheese?
I want no mayo.
No mayo?
If you have, maybe if you have vegan mayo. Vegan mayo.
Vegan?
Yeah. Give me a vanilla shake.
You say?
Yes. I want whipped cream and the cherry.
With cherry?
Yeah. I want sweet potato french fries.
Sweet fried rice?
Yes.
Yeah.
You writing this down?
Yeah.
Okay, good. I don't like waiters that like to remember it, and I want you to write it down. Okay? Good. All right. Not too much salt. Low sodium diet.
Sodium?
Yes.
Yeah.
Can I have a salad too?
Yeah.
Appetizer, salad.
Salad?
Salad. Yeah. And buffalo wings. Wings?
Wings?
Yeah. Buffalo wings. Flat.
So thank you so much for everything that you do every single day to support your scholar at home and at school. And if there's one message that I would love for us to remind ourselves of, is that it is never too late. It is never too late for a person to become proficient with literacy acquisition. If we have a kiddo that is in the 10th grade, it's not too late. If we have a scholar that is in kindergarten, it's not too late. If we have a scholar that is in college, it is not too late. That we can continue to tackle this one bite at a time, and especially at the K-12 space. If you've not had an opportunity to listen to this podcast, Sold a Story, I would offer that it is one of the most compelling podcasts to really put a stake in the sand and say, as for us as a nation, we need to continue to lean into reading research and not be sold a story. So please feel free to listen to this after our session today if you've not had an opportunity, and perhaps you will find some similarities in what's happening and has been happening across Washington State. So thank you, Sarah, for the introduction. It's an honor to be here tonight. Just really briefly, in the school year 21 to 22, I had the opportunity to serve in almost every state. And in my history since 2013, being a classroom teacher, a principal, and then also an executive director, as well as working outside of the public ed space, I've had the opportunity to support 49 out of 50 states on reading research. The only state that I have not been able to get into yet to talk with educators is the state of Hawaii. But I'm just honored to say that I've had the opportunity to work with nearly every state in the United States of America on reading research. And more specifically, in the last 2 years, I've worked with the Mississippi Department of Education to write and author, same thing, to author content for adolescent literacy proficiency. Because as we know, Mississippi has been really working for the last 10 years on reading research, getting reading research into every single classroom at the K-3 level. And now their question has been, how do we move reading science into action in grades 4 through 8? And most specifically, I've been working at the middle school level. I authored their Tier 1 structure that we continue to support across the state of Mississippi. And speaking of Mississippi, since that is where I'm at right now, my last night in Mississippi until I go home for a week and then heading back to Mississippi the very next week to spend Valentine's Day out here by myself. Don't feel sorry for me. I'm loving it. We're going to start cohort 4, but speaking of adolescent literacy proficiency, but speaking of Mississippi, why don't we go ahead and think about what Mississippi has done in the last 20 years? In 2013, they started this legislation, pushing it out across the state. And that meant that every single K-3 teacher was trained in the science of reading. In addition to that, they had literacy coaches that were deployed and are still deployed today for the last 10 years. They have a multitude of coaches that are working in classrooms and with schools and districts every single day. So let's go ahead and think about the data. Since 1998 to 2019, according to the National Assessment of Educational Progress, Mississippi has gone from 203 points on the national report card to 219. If we look at Washington State in 1998, we were 213 and now we're 220. So because it's late in the evening and I'm sure that we've all worked today, I went ahead and did the math for us. That means that Mississippi has had a 16-point jump in the last 20 years and Washington State has had 7. One might say, well, it's easier for Mississippi to move because they were at the bottom. So it's easier to go up if you were at the bottom, if you were ranked 50th. But what I'd like to offer is, again, to think about, let's look at the economics of Washington State versus Mississippi. And let's look at the multitude of other issues that are penetrating Mississippi that are not evident and present in Washington State. So what I would offer is that we can look at Mississippi as a real model of how we can continue to move forward, ensuring literacy and justice for every scholar in every classroom. And my space is instruction. I believe that instruction changes lives. And I know that we're talking to parents tonight, and I'm so glad that you're here. And for 7 hours of the day, 6.25 hours of the day, our scholars have an opportunity to go into our school system. And I believe that our school system is at a precipice, at a breaking point in which we will have the opportunity to kind of ride that wave into reading research in every single classroom for every single scholar and teacher, because nobody wants to sit and look at a scholar that is struggling. Not a parent, not a teacher, not a principal. That's not why we're in this field. So my point in bringing these slides to the table is to know that we really can look at other places across the country and really just do a cookie cutter to make sure that we have the type of results that others are. When I think about literacy, I think about literacy as a civil right. And I wonder in Washington State, if we looked at the National Assessment for Educational Progress and we look at the disaggregated data for demographics, I wonder if we would see who are the individuals who are able to become literate. And what the data is saying is that if people have money, yes. If people are white, yes. If people are female, yes. And if you are on the school lunch program, if you are an individual who is Hispanic, you are scoring 27 points lower than white students. If you are a Black student, you are on average, according to the 2019 data, 19 points lower than white scholars. So when I think about this work that we're doing every single day, and I thank you, Decoding Dyslexia, for really truly being the lead in Washington State to move us forward into reading research for all. I thank you so much, because when I think about this slide, this is literally the work that you are doing every single day on behalf of every scholar. So we're not done yet in Washington State. We're just at the beginning, and there is great hope ahead of us. And it's going to continue to take all of us moving together and advocating for the very best practices in classrooms so that our scholars can thrive. And you're probably wondering, well, what can I do at home? What can I do at home? And also, how can I support the learning environment at school? So let's go ahead and jump into that. Our outcome for tonight and our outcome, my hope and my dream is for thriving scholars and thriving families. And when that happens, we have thriving communities. But really quickly, just like last week, let's go ahead and check out the research on how we can ensure people are thriving. How do you think reading proficiency occurs? What do you think reading proficiency relies on? If you're thinking C, instruction, you are 1000% correct. According to research, what percentage of scholars can read at grade level by the end of year one? And if you were saying that 95% of scholars can learn how to read at grade level by the end of first grade, you are correct. And here are some of the citations down below. They're not exhaustive, there are more. This is all that I decided to put in tonight. At first grade, a first grade student reading at or above grade level practices predicts what, good humans? And if you said that first grade reading performance predicts to fourth grade reading performance, you are absolutely correct. And what does it take for people to comprehend what they read? I think that you're thinking E, and you are correct. Here's one that in Washington State, I'm really appreciative of all the educators who are leaning into this fact, this very scientific neurological fact. For students to automatically decode or fluently recognize words, what do people need to be able to do? And it's not practice reading to self. If I don't know how to read, reading to self is not going to be a huge boost for me. It's also not memorizing the shapes of letters or word lists. I have the spelling test, so I'm just going to memorize it. That actually is not efficacious either. But we know that the frontal lobe is for sounds, and the occipital lobe, that's where we have print awareness. And then what we have in the angular gyrus is the sound symbol connection. And that's really what is important for us to do every single day in classrooms until scholars have this cemented understanding of sound symbol relationship and can read fluently. When we think about explicit instruction, explicit instruction kind of fell out of favor. Definitely as a public educator for 17 years in the public system in Washington State, say the word explicit and it's almost as if you have horns on your head. 3 heads, explicit instruction. Some in Washington State would say, ooh, explicit instruction is boring and it's below us. But what I would like to offer is that if you're a football player, you would need explicit instruction to be able to understand how to play the game of football. The same is very much true for understanding how to read, write, and spell. So let's continue to think that explicit repeated practice is necessary, that there is never too much explicit repeated practice to commit information to long-term memory, because if we don't own it, we need more explicit repeated practice for us to own the information. And then as we own the information, then the teaching can become more implicit, but we cannot start instruction with implicit instruction. Instruction must be explicit before we move to implicit. And then the very last one, I just working with seventh graders today in Mississippi. I was asking the seventh graders, do you think that the English language is logical? And much to my surprise, many of them in the classroom said, yes, it is logical. And that is because they have a seventh grade teacher that went through the cohort 3 of Mississippi's success, ensuring secondary success sessions. And they have been taught that the English language can be owned because it is a logical polyglot. So when we think of those things, those are just some of the very most essential basic concepts for us as parents to understand, and we as educators to understand, to have us all on equal footing so that we're talking apples to apples in the same body of research evidence. So now let's go ahead and talk about that learning environment. And, the entire reason why I have my company this is not a sales pitch. I just have to tell you what, I am a desperate human being to make sure that by the time I go to the other side of this life, that I will have done everything that I can on this earth. I would have left it all on the table, all out on the basketball court to ensure the most amount of people are reading at grade level. And the only way that I can think about doing that is fixing tier 1, going into what we call in education tier 1 instruction. And I'm going to talk about that, if you don't mind, so that we all have clarity on what this whole tier 1 thing is. And what I'd like to offer parents is that your scholar may have an IEP, perhaps. Your scholar may be positioned to have an IEP, perhaps. And nonetheless, your scholar is a basic education, general education scholar first and foremost. Every scholar is first a general education scholar, and all scholars have the opportunity to, if qualified, receive extra services, including an IEP. So what I'm believing that we can do, and according to this Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction's quotation, when we think about what we can do for scholars, there is actually a framework that you may be familiar of. It's called the multi-tiered system of supports. And what that means, as we know, is that everybody should, I went ahead and bulleted this for us, everybody, all educators must be able to provide evidence-based practices for scholars. And that's starting in general education classrooms. And you know what? I don't know of one teacher in Washington State that doesn't want to do the very best for their kiddos in their classroom. I do not know of one. And I've met quite a few in my lifetime. So thinking about, I want to do the best for all of the scholars in the classroom in which I serve, but how do I know what are evidence-based practices? That is the real work that we have set up in front of us in Washington State. Because this framework says every scholar should have an opportunity to have evidence-based practices as instruction. And I would just offer that some evidence-based practices are not perhaps being brought to the table as they should in every single school district across Washington. We're not there yet. We're not there yet. So for example, if I walk into a classroom and I see a classroom that looks like this, if you don't mind, I'm just going to go ahead and show you. If I walk into the classroom and for that, quote, tier 1 instruction, if I'm noticing that a teacher has taught explicitly for 15 minutes, and then scholars are farmed out to center stations after that explicit instruction, and then we are having 15 minutes of a center time here, 15 minutes of a center time here, 15 minutes of a center time here, 15 minutes of a center time here for tier 1 instruction, which according to this document, we are talking about grade level accessibility. Well, if I'm at a level A book here and I'm reading this on my own, and I'm at a little teacher station maybe over here, and then I'm going to a writing station and I'm writing on my own without anybody. And then I'm going to a little word work and I'm practicing on my own, but I have not solidified my literacy skills yet Guess what this 45 minutes is, best friends?
Hey,
This-
Stacy, are we
Yes.
supposed to be able to see your screen?
Oh my gosh, I'm so glad that you said that because it does say, oh, and I was just doing such a fantastic job
I can
showing
hear you.
this demonstration. I was absolutely animated around it. I apologize as to why I'm having this difficulty tonight. How about this, best friends? Can you see this?
Yep.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. I'm sorry. And feel free to just interrupt me when I make a mistake with my tech. So thank you. I appreciate what you just did. That was awesome. So 15 minutes of explicit instruction for tier one, like, okay, this is grade level stuff. I'm providing explicit instruction. And now I'm sending everybody to center activities for the rest of the tier one instruction, in which scholars will have 15 more minutes with the teacher. Best friend, let's do the math on that. That means that kiddos will have 30 minutes of explicit instruction to be able to support learning versus if I have a 60-minute block, 30 minutes is half. I'm only providing half of the amount of time that I could really be incorporating efficacious practices back and forth around grade level rigor and scaffolding up people's phonics skills and writing skills while I'm teaching. We're getting our teach on for 60 versus we're getting our teach on for 30. We can just do that times 180 and think about the instructional minutes of difference between whole group instruction for 60 minutes versus whole group instruction for 15 minutes. And then you're doing something by yourself as a 6-year-old. You're doing something by yourself as a 6-year-old. You're doing something by yourself as a 6-year-old. And then you finally come back to the teacher. So the whole point in me going through this, when I think about, okay, besties, I'm going to stop sharing, then share again, because I know that if I do that, then you will definitely be able to see the screen because I'm having a difficult time with my technology navigating back and forth. All right. See this, best friends? The PowerPoint?
Yep, we see it.
Fantastic. So when I think about 30 minutes of explicit instruction versus 60 minutes of explicit instruction over 180 days, that is a significant amount of time that we have lost with providing equitable access to instruction, implementing evidence-based practices. So a really quick thing that we can do as parents is continue to encourage well, first of all, I thank you for being in classrooms when you can, because when we are in classrooms, then we have an opportunity to really partner with schools and support our thinking around, what is happening. But now if we're in public schools, and public schools are just that, public. Isn't that so cool? And we're the public. And what's so great is that the best public schools are the public schools that partner with parents, partner with the community. So what we can do is we can be in schools, we can watch this tier one instruction and say, hey, let's talk about the tier one instruction that's happening. Can I watch tier one instruction? When is tier one instruction happening? So that's number one. When is tier one happening? And then also, is my scholar a part of the tier one instruction? And again, what I would offer is that if we're using a workshop model, a workshop or daily 5 model in tier one instruction, again, that's going towards the 15 minutes of explicit instruction and everything else is in a center, which in my professional opinion and judgment, I've never watched a school, a classroom, a school, or a district get to 90 and 95% of scholars reading at grade level with the model of, I'm going to teach for 15 minutes and then you're all going to go to a center to try to continue to learn. Okay, so let's go ahead and right that ship. Let's go ahead and set that cornerstone. Now let's think about, well, what instruction would we see if we were in the classroom? Well, this is the trademark from the International Dyslexia Association. What we would see is a structured literacy approach, and a structured literacy approach would take on 4 elements. Number 1, multimodal, which means we say it, we listen, we write, we read, and we move. The next thing again is explicit. I cannot overstate that. The other thing is cumulative and then diagnostic. And when you get the link to this PowerPoint, you'll be able to see all the TikTok videos that I embedded to be able to drive home the point of each of these pieces. But when I think about multimodal, again, it means that it's not just sit and get, it is an interactive back and forth, and people are, again, having an opportunity to read, write, listen, speak, and move. Explicit is so very key. And again, there's a TikTok video on this. There's a person that you can follow if you want to, if you have a TikTok account. And she is called I Am That English Teacher. And she has the most explicit syntax lessons of anybody that I've ever watched before. It's chef's kiss. She's a 5-star, 5 out of 5 in terms of explicit instruction. So I'm going to hop over that really quickly. And then the next piece, as I mentioned, is cumulative. So we start with short vowel A, and then we go from basic phonics into advanced phonics. That is a cumulative approach in the classroom. And in addition to that, there's that TikTok video that I think you're going to enjoy. This is one of the most key pieces that we can watch in the classroom. And this is what I think about when thinking about all the phenomenal educators in Washington State. A phenomenal educator in Washington State is going to be diagnostic when they teach. I will say something, the scholars cumulatively, globally will say something. The word is batch. What's the word? And we listen for the word that the scholars say back. And if I hear out of 25 voices, anybody that misarticulated the word, I just give another opportunity. The word is batch. What is the word? Yep, watch my mouth, batch. What is it? Batch. We will batch up the papers, batch. Anyway, blah, blah, blah. So diagnostic, sometimes I think it's too late by the time we take tests with scholars to do anything about it. Let's continue to assess while we're teaching. So I love it. I love watching teachers that are very diagnostic and having a back and forth relationship with scholars. So go ahead and watch that video if you'd like to see a mother who is diagnostic in her practice with homework. But when speaking about that tier 1 design, what I did on that very sloppy piece of paper is articulated in these 2 slides. This is the type of instruction that I'm hoping all of America, including Washington State, will move away from in this core tier 1 out of the gate, teaching people how to read at grade level. Let's give scholars a real shot. Let's give scholars a real opportunity to hear and practice the phonics skills, the syntax skills, how to read, how to write in community, and then after that, go to small group differentiated instruction. I think it's really going to help us accelerate student performance. So those are just a couple of key pieces when thinking about, I'm a parent, I have a scholar who might be having a difficult time in school at the present time. What am I going to do? Well, I want to partner with educators. And when partnering, I also want to know kind of what is that design of instruction for that initial instruction. We can set the cornerstone and have that be the most advantageous. So that second part is all in the learning. So when we think about the learning that will occur in the classroom, feel free to take a screenshot. And again, you will have the slide deck. I think that we uploaded it or we put it into the chat. So that's fantastic. Please feel free to use this if you find it relevant and helpful. But we're thinking about with learning that there's a progression for understanding phoneme and phoneme articulation. How does a sound, what are the acoustics of a sound? What are the motor features of a sound? A phoneme is the smallest unit of sound in language. How can we have accuracy perceiving sound and producing sound and getting sounds in the correct order? All of that is really great instruction that we should see in kindergarten and first grade. And then perhaps we can also practice at the phoneme level, even in the 6th, 7th, and 8th grades. I was in a classroom today and we were talking about a hypothesis. What is the word? Hypothesis. Syllabicate hypothesis. Hypothesis. Let's go ahead and say the last 3 sounds in hypothesis. Okay, good. Yep, it's the syllable sis. Say the sounds. It's. How do you think you would spell for that? As soon as we go from sound into spelling, then we are in phonics. So phoneme and phoneme understanding is fantastic, and explicit instruction around that is great. We should see that in classrooms, and I know that we are doing that. One little note. There is research on overworking the paint with phonemic awareness that when people own and establish phonemic awareness to be able to segment a word. So the word is catch, tell me the sounds in catch. Really, that is key for us to be able to transition into writing. And we wouldn't want to spend more time than necessary on phonemic awareness. People with dyslexia will most likely need more support in phonemic awareness. So that is fantastic. So having educators that can lean into the amount of phonemic awareness that is necessary is critical. But in addition to that, this is the one thing across the United States of America, this as well as handwriting and syntax. Phonics, syntax, and handwriting have kind of been naughty words in the space of public education since actually the 1980s. If you want to get down to the brass taxes of it. And so, really coming back to the thinking that in the English language, there are sounds and sounds map to print, and that the English language is very logical. So when supporting schools, it's great to look at the instructional materials that school districts are using. If school districts have instructional materials that do not have a phonics scope and sequence, best friends, I'm nervous. I'm nervous about that. That's not a good idea. That's not good for scholars. And, I think that school districts are working really hard to make sure that we have some type of support so that teachers have support on building phonics up in the classroom. How do sounds map to print? I love that. All right. So the other thing that we're going to be talking about will be morphemes. In addition to that, syntax and reading and writing. So this is in part 2, if you don't mind. Some things that you will see in the classroom will be things called Elkonin boxes or some syllable practice. So that is wonderful. That's what we want to see. When we think of syllable practice, we know that if a word is multisyllabic and we're having a difficult time reading it, we have 4 different rules for us to split words on. So that's fantastic as well. I like to do little free science of reading trainings every now and again, and I just did one a couple of months ago on syllabication. I'd be happy to put another free professional learning session together if anybody's interested to learn about how we can attack and tackle multisyllabic words. But know that educators will be supporting, science of reading educators will be supporting scholars and the fact that there are multisyllabic words that can be navigated. In addition to that, best friends, we will see in the classroom some ideas around syntax. And if you're wondering what these pictures are of, this is representing an independent clause. An independent clause should roll off of the tongues of scholars, knowing what an independent clause is and what a dependent clause is. Yes, I do understand clauses CLAWS, but I just thought that this independent clause, CLAUSE is independent clause, and that this is CLAWS. But I just thought that this was a very graphic way for people to remember the elements of syntax, and that we're looking within a sentence for what an independent clause is and what a dependent clause is. So just really quickly, how I would do this type of thing, both at home, I'm going to share my screen in a different way. How I would do this at home with scholars would be this. If I have a sentence, best friends, if you want to put a sentence down, and this is what we can do in classrooms as well. She sat. All right, scholars, she sat. What is the subject in the sentence? The who in the sentence is she. Who? The subject is encompassing this pronoun, which is acting as the noun. Yep. And this owl, who. Every sentence needs a who and a do. So here's the who in the sentence, a person, place, or thing. Fantastic. This owl has a little bow on her head. She also has a little lollipop. Those are things. And this is meant to be like a person, the owl. Good. So here is the subject. All right. So is there a predicate or a verb? Yes, sat. And here is the picture for verb. All right, fantastic. This is a picture of a girl and she is reading. So this is the do in the sentence. Every sentence needs a who and a do. And we also have to ask ourselves, does this make sense? So the reason why I'm loving the thinking around syntax and making syntax very much alive instead of every sentence needs a subject and a verb. If I'm a scholar that's having a difficult time reading, this is an extra cognitive load for me. This visual representation helps me to get to the main point of subject and verb without being all bogged down in the words subject and verb. Is that making sense? Because at the end of the day, every scholar, if I just have the most basic skills in decoding, I know that this is sh, I know that this is an open syllable E, long vowel E. I know that this is a closed syllable word, short vowel A, the sounds are s, at, boom. If I know that those basic pieces, then I can read this sentence, but can I write it? I cannot write it in the proper syntactic order and understand what this is as an independent clause unless I know that every sentence needs a complete subject and a complete predicate. And the reason why this is so important, best friends, in terms of syntax, and we can support this with our kiddos at home, if you don't mind. All right, it's because, yeah, this is pretty easy right here. A simple sentence has one who and one do, correct? One subject and one verb. But look at what happens when we get into compound sentences. Compound sentences are two independent clauses, See this woman that is independent. I'm free to dance on my own. I can stand on my own. That's an independent clause, right? From the simple sentence. Every compound sentence will have a who and a do with perhaps a coordinating conjunction. And these are words that are aligned with a coordinating conjunction, as well as a simple subject as well as a subject and a predicate on the other side of the comma. So the point is, we want all scholars to be able to write, period. When I think about literacy proficiency, I really appreciate syntactic awareness, understanding the structure of the English language. And then also when I think about, well, how do we get to the structure? It seems to me in my pea-sized brain that the easiest way to get to the structure is to create a semantic mental model of what that structure is. Every sentence, again, needs a subject and a predicate for a simple sentence. And then when we move into a compound sentence, then we basically are just compounding that simple sentence. Anyway, so I'm hoping that that's helping individuals as we continue to navigate through. I have a kiddo at home who perhaps doesn't like to write. Well, if your kiddo does not like to write at this current point in time, then feel free to use any type of pictorial to represent the concepts of syntactic awareness. Try that. I hope that helps you. It's something that I've been working on for the last 6 months, traveling across the country, really trying to teach people the different types of sentences. The different types of sentences are, if you're taking notes, simple, compound, complex, and then compound complex. So if scholars can write a simple sentence, check, that's awesome. The next thing we want to teach and support our scholars with is how to write a compound sentence. And it can look like that, like this, or another one that I don't have on my screen. And then a complex has a dependent clause. Here's my dependent clause, grabbing that part of this sentence. That dependent clause will have a subordinating clause to it. Here are some words that go with subordinating clauses, and then an independent clause on the other side. So this is called a complex sentence. And when we think about the level of readability of text, text becomes more difficult based upon the syntactic structure of sentences as one key point. In addition to that, the words also become more robust and rare, but syntax is one key lever to increasing reading proficiency and also helps with writing. So I'm just kind of flying through these major concepts, and we're going to have an opportunity in the next 2 minutes. So I'm going to close up to have a conversation with one another, ask questions, think together. But these are just a couple of more concepts that we can support at home and at school. These are the things that we would see at school and what we might want to lean into at home. There are these things called morpheme cards, and Latin is one of those word origins. Et etymologies that can really support scholars in their understanding of words. Any unknown word, if I can see the morpheme or the smallest unit of meaning inside of a word, that's really going to help. So please feel free to continue to think with scholars, your scholar, about how words can be deconstructed and reconstructed to make lots of different words based upon their meaningful parts. So just in summary, the very first thing that we as parents, as a parent, my father was a person with dyslexia. It runs in our DNA. Hopefully I'll have grandkids someday. I'm on high alert for dyslexia in the future because of again, my DNA strand. And so what I know is this: as a future grandparent, perhaps of a person with dyslexia, I have no idea what the future holds. But the first thing that I'd be super hyper vigilant about is making sure that the first instruction is the best instruction that we can have that be, because no amount of intervention will be able to make up for tier 1 instruction that puts people behind. You know, we ran the numbers on that. It was 30 minutes versus 60 minutes. That's half. So it can be really powerful having our first instruction be the best instruction. So the next piece is just continuing to support our scholars like we do, and having educators that understand the layers of language and teaching explicitly through the layers of language. That is a powerful, powerful way to ensure literacy and justice for all. And just a reminder, best friends, it's never too late. It's never too late. So let's talk. Thank you for your time tonight. Let's talk. What questions do you have? What's burning in your mind? What are some current situations that you're in that you would like to raise up? We are here for you. And I was not watching the chat, obviously. I'm so sorry, because hotel room thing, you know how that goes.
Stacy, there was a couple of questions that got put in the chat, but that I'm going to ask, but I also want to make sure people know that they can unmute if they're more comfortable asking their questions after we talk about these two, or you're still welcome to please put questions in the chat. The first one was from Aileen, and she asked about, you were using the term diagnostic, and we often think about that in relationship with evaluations for special education, and that's something that our school psychs do, or we're diagnosing a disability, or we're diagnosing a condition. Can you explain a little bit more in-depthly what you mean about teachers being diagnostic with their instruction, so parents can have a better understanding of what you're talking about in the context of a classroom?
Oh, fantastic. Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Is everybody able to see my screen of the ABC?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. So when thinking about, yeah, that is so true. When we think about this term diagnostic from the structured literacy trademark, it's really talking about how in instruction, we can have this back and forth relationship with scholars. And it's not talking about, I'm going to provide the comprehensive test of phonological processing. That CTOP comprehensive test of phonological processing is a quote diagnostic metric that, true to Miss Eileen's point, can only be provided by a practitioner that has been trained up to a certain sophistication level. So that's yes, true. That's a different type of thinking around diagnostic. The diagnostic that I'm referring to is this opportunity to teach and be responsive in the moment to where the scholars are at in the classroom. So for example, if we run through the alphabet and we say chorally, A, B, seek, cease, and hardly anybody is able to keep up with my fluency rate, our fluency rate around letter name and sound. And we're in the second grade as a whole group. As a practitioner, I'm thinking, number one, that is giving me good diagnostic information about who has the most basic of basic skills in the classroom. And if it's a global response of glazed over looks, then for me as a practitioner, I don't have to wait and say everybody goes to intervention. Everybody goes and has an IEP. For me as an educator, that tells me right here in the moment, I have a real opportunity to get my teach on. and to go for it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to scaffold down and go like this. I say it, now you say it. I say it, you say it. Eb, seek, cease, deed. So so what I'm meaning to say by having a diagnostic lens while we're teaching is to keep up with all of the responses of the scholars in the classroom, whole group, listen to all 25 voices at once and figure out in the moment who has it, who doesn't, how many out of the whole group have the skill that you're asking them to do. And then we just teach in that moment. It is the organic nature of teaching and learning, being flexible on our feet to meet the needs of all scholars in the moment. And this might sound impossible, but once we just see it in action and we watch our colleagues do this type of instruction, that is when we know teachers are a whole nother breed, like able to do things beyond just the typical human population. You know, there's so much information that a person is receiving at that time as a teacher that is leading through the eyes of a diagnostic teaching practice. So it's basically pitch something, see what people do in their response, and then we respond in relation to what the scholars have just said. So I hope that made a little bit more sense.
That was amazing. There's a couple new questions that are coming in, and which is great. We love people putting information in the chat. There's two, and it's kind of interesting, or three questions that just came in. One person posted, what's the first resource that you would recommend for parents with a child recently diagnosed with dyslexia? So like at the beginning of the journey, but there's a couple other questions about, and I think this is really speaking to some of the work you've recently been doing in Mississippi with sort of that secondary and, you know, third grade and above, is how should teachers handle an older student in a general education classroom who's not a fluent reader or writer, but when they're expected to read that material independently or answer questions and to write paragraphs, or they're really struggling with their spelling, but they're not necessarily on an IEP yet.
Oh, yes. And I love this because really what we're doing is we're speaking to the National Assessment of Educational Progress. And if we looked at the 8th grade scores, and that would mean that 50+% of 8th graders currently are in that boat. Over half of America's population. So that is a home run question right there. And you know, it is true. So in Mississippi, for example, when speaking with educators and what we can do, what we do know about the research on older scholars would be these things. Number one, that motivation, best friends, is a byproduct of two things. I'm quoting research here, and I'd be happy to send the research citations if you want to kind of dig into this. But I don't want anybody to think that I'm just making this up. Motivation is a byproduct of relevance and success, which means that when I think about an older reader, I will be motivated to even give any effort at all. Okay, let's think about this. Why is motivation a key factor in adolescent literacy proficiency? Because in kindergarten, perhaps I wasn't the best reader. 1st grade, 2nd grade, 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade, 6th grade. Now I'm in 7th grade and I'm embarrassed as heck that I'm in 2nd grade or 7th grade and I am still not proficient in reading, writing, and spelling. That is when motivation starts to kind of tank and wane, right? Okay, because I've had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years in a school system, and I've not felt successful yet. How am I even motivated to show up? I haven't had success for 8 years. So when I think about supporting an adolescent scholar, the first thing that I always like to talk about with educators is besties. We have to be so diagnostic and have this back and forth relationship with kiddos the whole time that they're in the classroom. This back and forth exchange, I say something, you say something, I say something, you say something, in this back and forth tango, because I have to, with my diagnostic ears, hear what everybody is saying and then respond in the moment to where the class is so that the class can be successful. And who is the class? The class is made up of 25 scholars, and more than 50% are not reading at grade level. So what does that mean for me? I can't just be sage on the stage and go ahead and, spew out all this 7th grade stuff. I have to pitch a concept, see where you are with it, and ensure that I do everything to approximate to the success of, I want you here, the class is here, how do I get here? So that is such a great question. And I guess if I wanted to nutshell it, it would be for us to continue to work with educators around how educators can be explicit, multimodal, diagnostic, and cumulative in instruction, because that type of instruction breeds success, and success breeds motivation. And in addition to that, there's one other concept when thinking about a middle school scholar or an older scholar, and that is best friends. A level A book or a level C book. First of all, the whole leveling system, that's for the birds. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. When we think about, my body has matured, and now I'm looking at a book, and the book is comparable to this. The cat sat on the mat, and there are big words on the page, and there might even be some pictures. That is not relevant to my maturation. When we think about adolescent literacy proficiency, one of the key features of adolescent literacy proficiency is that I'm not a little kid anymore. It is maturation. I look differently, I feel differently, and yet I'm still getting the level A book. How is the level A book relevant to my life right now? So when I think about supporting educators, I really like the thought around how we can continue to support kiddos at school having greater success. Because if I have more success with information that is relevant to my state of development as a human being, which is, it is more relevant for me to be in 7th grade, a 7th grade textbook, even if I cannot read every single word on the page yet. That 7th grade book, I'm a chameleon. I want to blend into my environment. I don't want to have my own book that is, with big print and really simple words. I want to look like just the rest of the kids. So it takes a very savvy educator to be able to scaffold people into the text in whole group instruction and make sure that people are successful. So it kind of takes more. We could go on and on for a 5-day session, 6 hours a day, to talk about how we exactly do this and how we structure it. And I hope to have that opportunity, but those are just a couple of key levers. Dump the level text and be diagnostic.
So many great questions getting popped into the chat, I gotta say. I'm so excited with this conversation that's happening. There was a question about, I want to go back to the one about if you've got a kiddo who's just been diagnosed with dyslexia, where do you think is a great place family should start? That was one that I want to make sure we don't miss.
Right.
And then there's some other ones about curriculums that after that I want to hit with you, because I know that this is also one of the strengths in your wheelhouse as well. So,
So, just a commercial for Decoding Dyslexia. Decoding Dyslexia Washington. And then, secondly, the International Dyslexia Association and the resources that are provided there. So just heading to the Decoding Dyslexia website, and then IDA, there'll be a plethora of materials to lean into. So that, I think that's probably where I would leave that one.
Thank you. Decoding Dyslexia Washington did create some really great resources for families for having conversations with their schools, that I'm, as a part of that leadership team, going to also promote here, and those are available on our website, and I'll try to find the link and put them in the chat here in a second. So another really great question is, how should we be thinking about districts using phonics curriculums that's not integrated in with the rest of the literacy curriculum, as we're hearing kind of the phonics patch out there, right? But another person wrote, what, we talk about maybe eradicating those stations, right? And needing to do that direct instruction. But then how do you recommend differentiation within that classroom if we're not having that time to pull those kids individually while the other kids are at centers?
Yeah, I love that. And I always over message whole group, dump the centers. And the reason why I over message whole group is because the United States of America, since the 1980s, has been leaning into small group. So I'm trying to do a course correct. So first, I just like to offer that it would not be the case that we would never be in centers. It would just be that people go to centers after receiving explicit instruction and we have no more questions. Listen, we're learning about not just inference making today, we're learning about how to construct sentences. And today, the sentences that we're going to construct are complex sentences. Does everybody understand what a dependent clause is? All right, cool. Yeah, I see it. I'm pitching the dependent clause. I want you to go ahead and write for the dependent clause. I'm watching your spelling within the dependent clause with 30 people while we're doing this. And then I'm pitching you the independent clause part of it. And then I'm asking you to identify the factors within. So basically the point is that it all has to do with teacher knowledge. The more knowledgeable the teacher is around the layers of language, the faster it is for teachers to be able to differentiate instruction in a whole group, because number one, we know what we're aiming for. If I know the articulatory features and gestures of phonemes and that there are 44 phonemes in the English language, you bet your bottom dollar I'm going to be able to spot who's not articulating the sound correctly. And then I'm going to be able to give very focused feedback right now in the moment. And I'm not going to be like, hey, I think we need to have a special education meeting on this because this person's not articulating phonemes. No, best friends. It's the teacher knowledge of the layers of language to be able to employ. That is the number one way that we can differentiate in the moment, because we are so knowledgeable. We can't help ourselves but to go in and help the quote patient. And I think about a nurse, right? The nurse has to have such knowledge that the nurse has to be able to walk into the room and go, code red, and then do something about it. That's the same thing. And if a nurse wasn't knowledgeable around what the nurse was looking for, then the nurse wouldn't be able to do anything about it. So yeah, teacher knowledge is number one. And then also showing people kind of what that looks like to be diagnostic in the practice of whole group instruction. Those are the real missing pieces that I see across the United States of America. Teachers want to be that, but teachers have not had the opportunity yet to receive this global message about there's freedom in instruction. There's freedom in knowledge, and there's freedom in being a diagnostic type of practitioner and turn on your teach. There's freedom in that. And there's freedom for kids because they're accelerating their growth and proficiency without having to be like 15 minutes and I'm going to meet with you and we're going to work on the cat sat. So those are just a couple of things that I would just offer. And just in terms of that phonics patch, I mean, really, when I think about the phonics patch, what are we doing? What are we doing? Learning and how information is processed in the human mind is not in silos.
Yeah.
So what I like to do is, just with Educate's content, the content that I've authored with the frameworks for kindergarten and first grade and second grade and third grade, what we do is a backward design. We look at the text that the scholars are going to be reading that's at grade level, and we do a backward design, thinking about what a phonics scope and sequence is, and be like, okay, we're teaching closed syllables this week. What words within the text represent closed syllables? And you bet your bottom dollar we're going to go through closed syllables and have some attention around those, a pre-teach to the text. So I much prefer that. It makes much more sense. Like, these are the words that you're actually going to read and TikTok 20 minutes when we do whole group reading with at grade level text. So, it's just all about being super savvy with the materials that you have, instead of, oh, wow, we have a lot of rich text, but we don't have a phonics scope and sequence. So let's get UFLI. It's like, no, we can't keep asking teachers to plan with 10 different resources. And we can't keep having kids thinking that kids will understand what the teachers are talking about if we jump around from topic to topic and nothing makes sense, like we have to marry it all together. So yeah, the patches are not going to get us the literacy proficiency that scholars deserve and teachers deserve.
Yeah. Well, I want to be respectful of everyone's time. I want to acknowledge that it's we've gone a little over our designated time. I know that there are still maybe a few things trickling into the chat, and we'll go ahead and share those with Stacy. I know it's been posted, but we do this presentation will be posted to the Seattle Public Schools Seattle Special Education PTSA website under our resources tab for people to review, and Stacy has very generously made her slide deck available, and we've also posted the morpheme cards, which are really great if you have an older student who's struggling with decoding, to utilize to support some of that word level decoding and word level fluency. And I just want to thank Stacy so much for taking time out of her very, very busy and long days to come share her amazing wealth of knowledge with all of us, and to support all scholars here in Washington State and the families in Washington State in supporting their students' literacy growth. So thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah.
It was an honor.
Thanks everyone for being here, and keep an eye out on our organizations to see our upcoming events, including a disability justice workshop tomorrow night hosted by Seattle Special Education PTSA. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Thank
Good
you.
night. Thanks, Decoding
Bye.
Dyslexia.